Everyone to the loan officer sales training with the mortgage calculator. Today we're going to be talking about the fear of calling and overcoming that fear, which is a pretty common thing in this business or just in sales in general. So we'll get into it here in just a minute, but for now we'll wait a couple minutes to go live on all the different platforms. We are streaming this live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We are also on Apple Music and Spotify. So thank you everybody for tuning in to the podcast on the different streaming platforms. We appreciate it. I put the chat up on the screen, so feel free to drop a comment there in the chat while we wait to go live on all the different platforms. We appreciate everybody tuning in nice and early, and we'll get started here in just a moment. Today is Friday, so happy Friday to everyone. We'll go through the training here and we'll get started in just a moment. So just hang tight. All right. Looks like we got some comments starting to come in. Appreciate it, everybody. We'll get started in a moment. Keep dropping comments there as you tune in, and also feel free to drop any questions that you have as we go through the presentation here today. So it looks like we can go ahead and get started here. It looks like we are live on all the different platforms. So welcome everyone. My name is Kyle Hershey. I am the COO of the Mortgage Calculator. Today we are doing our loan officer sales training. The topic for today is going to be the fear of calling. How do we get over the fear of calling in this business as a loan officer? And also, any sales job out there is going to be the same. We got to pick up the phone, and it's not always easy. It's probably the most difficult part of sales for everyone. People are nervous about it or they're embarrassed about it, whatever the case may be. So today we're going to be talking about that. Now, let me go ahead and pull up my slides here. So we must pick up the phone business, right? That is just a fact. Most sales businesses, we have to pick up the phone. Now, to talk about the fear of calling and how we overcome that fear, the first thing, the first reason, the first motivation we have is money. Right? We're not going to make money if we don't pick up the phone. So what better motivation for us to overcome that fear of calling than money in our pocket? So when you're nervous or you're trying to get over that fear of calling, just think about that. Think about money in your pocket. And it's not going to come unless you pick up the phone and make the calls. So that should always be in your mind first and foremost. What is the motivation of making these calls? It will directly reflect in your income. Your income, especially in this business, is going to be an exact formula based on the number of calls you make. We've talked about this on past sales training, the power of the law of averages. And that's what comes up here. We must pick up the phone in this business in order to earn money. So our first source of motivation should be money in our pocket, because the money isn't going to just appear in our pocket by osmosis unless we pick up the phone. Now, when I say pick up the phone, I don't just mean dialing out. I also mean answering incoming calls. This is an industry where there are things happening at all times that have to do with our transactions, with our clients. So you are now, for those of you who are new to the business, obviously those that have been in the business for a while, you already know this. But for those of you who may be newer, you are now in the business that you have to answer your phone. You just have to. There is no more, I don't answer my phone because I think it's going to be a scammer, or I think it's going to be a telemarketer of some kind. Those days are over. You have to pick up your phone now. It's not an option. If this is the business that you're in, especially if you're dialing out, you're talking to clients, you have deals going on, there is no option to not pick up the phone to call out to get business, but there's also no option to not answer the phone. It just doesn't exist. So now that you're in this business, for those of you who are newer, you are now committing to answering your phone always. Yes, you'll probably get spam calls still. You're going to get telemarketers still, but now you have no choice but to weed those out. So I know a lot of people may, not answer their phone when they don't recognize the number and things like that. Well, those days are over for you now that you're in this business. You must answer your phone when you get those phone calls. Now, one thing that stops people from answering their phone all the time is the fear. And now we're not talking about the fear of dialing out. Now we're talking about the fear of an incoming call where there's not good news, where there's bad news, right? A deal fell through, something wrong, there's an issue, the client is calling you to figure out what's going on and why this hasn't closed, or why, whatever the reason may be. A lot of loan officers have a problem. They have a fear of answering that incoming call because they don't want to give the bad news. So all that does is compound the problem. Whatever problem there is, it's only going to be compounded if you don't answer the phone. Answering the phone when something is going on is extremely crucial, but you should be wanting to do that. You should be happy to do that. And really, you shouldn't be waiting until the person calls you. You should have already reached out to them, right? And whatever the situation is, the faster the issue is hashed out between the client and maybe their realtor, the buyer's agent, if that's what they're doing. These are all people who have to be included in these issues in order for us to be able to solve these issues as soon as possible. So do not have that fear of answering the phone. Not only do you need to answer, every call coming in because it may be a client, and you may not know it, you may not recognize the phone number, whatever the case may be. But when those calls come in that are difficult to deal with, we do need to answer those. Don't ignore them because you're not ready to tell them the bad news yet. You're just delaying the bad news and compounding the problem. So don't have that fear of answering the phone either. The fear of whether it's a telemarketer or the fear of whether it's somebody that you're going to have to break some bad news to. So now let's go back to talking about dialing out, right? Cold calls. These are great. We should all be thankful for cold calls. People don't usually like them. It's a bad word, right? Cold calls, nobody likes to do those, but we should be very thankful for them. Now, again, especially for newer people in the business, cold calls are great practice, right? Definitely use them as such. Now at the Mortgage Calculator, we have a bunch of cold call lists there in the dialer that you can call, and they're great practice to just get your feet underneath you, right? Now, a lot of people, think like, oh, well, I just got in this. I shouldn't be, calling people cold calls. I don't really know what to say. Well, these are the best calls to do, right? They are people who you will never speak to them again. Notice I have that on the bullet point there. If there's somebody who does not engage with you, if they are somebody who gets upset and hangs up on you, that's people's worst fear of calling. And it's going to be a lot higher of a chance that they're going to be upset that you called when it's a cold call, right? That's why everybody doesn't want to do cold calls. But remember, you're never going to speak to this person again. You don't know them. You're not going to meet them. You're never going to see them. You're not going to call them again after this. So who cares? You will never interact with this person again. You could even end up meeting them or something like that later, which I highly doubt. But even if you did, they wouldn't know you're the person who cold called them 6 months ago or whatever. So just really embrace that and know that who cares what they say? Who cares what they think? You will never speak to that person again. So what is the fear of picking up the phone and calling them? Sure, they might say, don't ever call me again. They might get upset and hang up. And you go, okay, cool. This is the next one. I press the button to go to the next call. We talked about the law of averages in one of the previous trainings. Remember that if you need to call 100 people to get one, that's fine. Somebody gets upset and hangs up on you. And in your mind, you just go, that's fine. That's one of the 99. That's one of the 99 that's not going to do it. There's nothing you can do to change that person's mind. They're just one of the 99. And that's okay, because you're still doing your job. And you know, when you call 100, whatever the conversion ratio may be, I'm just making this ratio up. But you know that when you call 100, you get one. So be happy when somebody hangs up on you. When somebody does that, you just say, oh, they're one of the 99. I'm going to keep going because I'm just still doing my job, and I'm going to eventually get that one. No problem. They were one of the 99. That's not going to do it, that didn't convert, that I'm not going to speak to ever again. So I think that's the biggest point of overcoming your fear of calling and your fear of calling cold calls is just remember, who cares? You're never going to speak to this person again. What do you care that they said bad things to you, or that they were annoyed by you, or that they hung up on you? Who cares? They're just a voice on the other end of the phone. It doesn't affect you at all. That's the next point here. Use cold calls to build up your armor. It doesn't matter what they say. Even if you're an experienced loan officer, you can still make cold calls to, again, build up your armor. The things people say to you are not going to matter once you've done hundreds or thousands of cold calls. It's going to bounce right off you, and you're really not going to care. But you can't get to that point until you pick up the phone and start doing it and get that practice in, right? The first time you talk to somebody, you're not going to have that armor up, right? It's going to take a little bit for you to build up to the point where you actually don't care at all. But again, I'm telling you from the start, you shouldn't care at all, but human nature says that you probably will, until you build up your armor by calling enough people and getting in that groove and saying to yourself, well, that's one of the 99 that didn't do it, but who cares? I'm never going to talk to this person again. So I don't need to be embarrassed about anything. I don't need to be upset about anything. Cool, whatever. They're one of the ones that's not going to do it, and I'm never going to talk to them again, and we're on to the next one. So don't be embarrassed. Don't be scared. You're not going to talk to that person ever again. So who cares? The other great thing about cold calls is there essentially is unlimited calls, right? Here at the Mortgage Calculator, we load up cold calls for you. There's essentially unlimited cold calls. If there's not any cold calls in there, our loan officers can tell us, and we'll load more cold calls up and stuff like that. So that's another thing that's great about cold calls. Again, you're going to go through them, use it as practice, and use it to build up your armor, use it to just build yourself as a loan officer up, see how the process works of when you do get a person. There are studies out there that show that once you get a hold of a cold call and actually push them through the process, sometimes they actually convert at a higher rate than somebody who wasn't a cold call. Now, obviously, I'm talking about, you've already talked to them, you've gathered their info, so now they're in the mix there. And once they're in the mix compared to the other people who are in the mix that you may have paid for those ads, some businesses and in some situations, the cold calls actually convert at a higher rate once they've got to that point. So use the cold calls to build up that armor, use the cold calls to get deals. And the great part about it is that I'm sure at most companies, as well as our company, there's usually an unlimited list of cold calls. Now, let's talk about the initial call, right? So really, Right now, I'm mostly, we're talking about the first phone call. And this goes for whether it's for a lead that you paid for that we gave you at the mortgage calculator for free, or it's a cold call. It all still applies. The initial call, the confidence is key. That's another reason why you have to really get it through, your head, I guess, that it doesn't matter. And when you realize it doesn't matter what happens at the other end of the phone, your confidence is going to be way higher. Also, training is important in this. When you've done your training properly and you're paying attention to what's going on and you've absolutely surrounded yourself, in with the training you need to be confident, you're going to be confident. You know that you don't care what happens on the other end of the phone. They're just either one of the 99 or they're the one that's going to do it. Either way, you're confident not only to get them on the phone, but also that you know your stuff once you do get them on the phone. I'm telling you right now, you are not going to be as confident and you're not going to convert as many leads if you don't have that training on the loan types, how the loans work, what the process is, what kind of programs that you have to offer them. If you don't have all that down, then your confidence is just naturally not going to be there. And that's going to shine through on the other side of the phone to your client. And you're going to convert much less people because you're not showing that confidence of, I know that I can help you. Our programs are the best. Our rates are the best. I know what I'm doing for whatever situation you have. I'm confident that I can speak to you about that situation, that I can offer ideas and solutions about that situation. So when you're calling, if you're just like, oh, I'm just calling them, I don't really remember all the stuff that we have, you're going to be way less confident. But when you know exactly what's going on because you've immersed yourself in all of the training, all of our loan programs, knowing that your interest rates are better than most brokers out there, those are the things that are going to shine through. And confidence, that's going to shine through to the other end of the phone. And that's key in converting these leads. Now, you also want to, this is something that a lot of people don't think of here, which is matching your client's energy. If they are quieter and really soft and they're not really, responding in a hyped way, you don't want to be on the other phone going, yeah, let's go. You can't do that. So you don't want to go down and be like, be really low energy and really, but you got to understand, yes, you want to be confident. Yes, you want to have some energy, but you don't want to completely, be the complete opposite of what they are. So make sure that you're not, that's really salesy and pushy when you're too energetic and they're not. Now, if they're pretty energetic and they're excited, then you be excited too, right? So matching your client's energy is important. That's also going to determine a conversion rate for you, getting more clients interested. Just understand when I say match your client's energy, just understand that I don't mean to go too low, right? You never want to go too low of your energy and your talking and your cadence and all that kind of stuff. You got to keep it here level at least, but just don't be too over the top when your client isn't like that, when they're not loud and excited and happy. You don't want to be crazy off the charts because it's just not going to mesh. You're not going to build that rapport properly. So make sure to just be aware of trying to match your client's energy, because what does that do? That builds more rapport. Nobody that's very a little more soft spoken and stuff like that. Nobody wants to pick up the phone again to somebody who's like super high energy. It just doesn't match, right? They're going to build more of a rapport with someone who's a little bit more like them when it comes to their energy, right? So keep that in mind. Now, when we talk about follow-up calls, A lot of people have fear of even doing follow-up calls when they've already spoken to the client. Have no fear. You don't have to be pushy. You don't have to be salesy. So a lot of people have that fear of, well, I already talked to them. They weren't ready to go then. Now I feel like I'm going to be annoying to them. Now I feel like I'm going to be real pushy and salesy. Well, you don't really need to worry about that. You're just going through the course of your business and doing your job, and keep this mindset going of you're checking in for their sake. You're not checking in to be salesy and pushy. You're checking in for the client's sake of making sure that you're helping them, that you're there to help them, that you're making sure they know about whatever it is that you're following up about. I want to make sure you know that we have these programs, or that, it's a good time to take advantage of them, or whatever the case may be. So you don't have to be salesy or pushy. You're presenting information to make sure that the client doesn't miss out on anything. You're not calling them for you, you're calling them for them, right? Because you don't want them to miss out on something. Whether you're reminding about what you already talked about, or whether you're approaching it differently, have some new programs that you want to let them know about, whether rates may have gone on a downtick, really not happening right now, but rates might have ticked downward a little bit and you want to let them know. So think of follow-up calls like that. Don't think of them as being for you. Think of them as being for the client. And that's going to put you in a much better mind state of following up with people, where you might not have been very excited to follow up because you already talked to them and you feel like you're going to be annoying them and all that kind of stuff. That's a big fear for a lot of loan officers. But remember, my last point here, fortune is in the follow-up. It's so true. You all know this if you've done sales. All of you who are experienced loan officers know this. It's true for every business in the world, any kind of sales business. Fortune is in the follow-up. And again, you're going to be more confident in following up. You're going to follow up easier. You're going to have less fear of following up when you get that mind state of, I'm doing the client a favor. If I don't follow up with them, I'd be doing them a disservice, because some people just need a little extra push. Some people just need to be reminded of something. And then again, a lot of the times you're following up with new information, new products, new rates, new quotes that you quoted them, especially here at the Mortgage Calculator. Remember, we re-quote everyone with our amazing quoting system every 3 days. So you always have something to talk to them about when you're doing the follow-up call. And you've already taken the time to re-quote them, resend them what you were talking about, and then you're following up with a phone call to make sure that they received that. You see how that's not pushy, that's not salesy. You're just saying, hey, I took the time. I wanted to give you the updated rates on that loan that we had talked about. Did you get that? Do you have any questions about it? And again, you're giving something of value here. That's what we talk about on our quote training. When you follow up with re-quoting them every 3 days on their scenario, you're providing them with value. So you should have no problem giving them a call, the follow-up call, to not be pushy, not be salesy, but saying, look, for your benefit, I pulled the rates for your scenario that we talked about. I pulled the current rates for you. And I want to make sure that you know that I did that you got the email and the text showing you that I did that. And I want to see if you have any questions about that, because I took my time to be able to provide that to you. Little bit of what we talked about 2 days ago, the power of reciprocity, right? You're reciprocating here. You're saying, I took the time to create a new quote for you, to update you on the rates. Did you take the time to check that out? Did you take the time to really look at it to where I can answer any questions for you because you took the time to actually take it in, right? So that goes back to reciprocation as well. So with that being said, I try to keep this to about half an hour. So it looks like we are good on timing here. I try to always give everybody a takeaway, something to actually do today. So I would like to challenge all loan officers out there, but especially loan officers at the mortgage calculator, to do some cold calls, right? I would get in the dialer, I would do some cold calls, and I would use them as practice. Keep in mind, you're never going to talk to them again. So have no fear. Let that build up your armor some. You have plenty of calls to do. You'll never run out of calls here at the mortgage calculator. So that would be my challenge to people today. If you're already done with your training, you're cleared to make calls, pull up some cold call lists. It doesn't matter whether they're an investor cold call list or a purchase cold call list or a reverse mortgage cold call list. It really doesn't matter much what it is. What matters is that you get on the phone and start that process of getting that practice and get in that mind state of, who cares, right? And again, to go back to the very beginning that we talked about, what's going to be your biggest push, your biggest motivation to have no fear and overcome that fear of calling is money in your pocket. It's not just going to get there. It has to be done by calling people, and not only calling out, but answering the incoming. It's not going to happen unless you do that. So when you do have that fear, when you are feeling like you don't want to hit the phones all day, take 3, 4, 5 hours out of your day to call a few hundred people, whenever you're feeling like that, just think to yourself, I need or want this money in my pocket. And the only way it's going to happen is if I get over this fear of calling, I get on the phone, make the calls, do the work, and that will equal closing loans, which will equal money in your pocket. So with that being said, let's wrap it up. Remember, 12 p.m. Eastern time, we do this sales training every weekday. Some good topics coming up for next week. We'll be right back here Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern for the next episode of the Loan Officer Sales Training with the Mortgage Calculator.